right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Van Leeuwen, for being with us. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about your recent publication in our journal. So I have a few questions for you. First of all, what made you want to write about some of the ethical issues that are coming up with COVID, especially with regards to liver disease?
Well, I think clinicians, we as in the hepatology community, have been facing tremendous new challenges with the COVID. And superficially, it seems that is more clinical care, etc., etc. But as someone recently introduced to me the term socio-technology, in fact, the societal concepts are much more important in integrating new concepts in healthcare. That is not pure technology. And so we get a pandemic over us. And number one, what I wanted to highlight for a moment, that history is filled with pandemics. There's not much new in the major issues that come up. In the beginning of history, communities that had the bubonic plague were overwhelmed by patients. They didn't know what to do with the dying. And then measures were taken by government that sometimes led to suppression, to limitations in the right of people. And all these themes repeat itself in history today. Governments take over for better and for worse. The framework, suddenly we realize we as doctors in isolation cannot do all kinds of things if we do not cooperate with other disciplines, with other authorities. And so I want to draw attention that even as a clinician, you need to understand the bigger framework behind that is there behind. And if we want to be successful in implementing new programs, etc., we need to understand that. And one topic, for example, is transparency, that we clearly communicate what is the basis, the sound foundation of recommendations that we make, or the uncertainties. How are they colored, our decisions, by specific shortages that may be totally different in Chicago or in Karachi or wherever we in the world are. So a clinician needs to understand the ethical legal framework of this.
And what are some of the ethical issues in your study of these topics? What are some of the ethical issues that come up with regards to COVID and what we're facing with this pandemic, with regards to liver disease specifically? Are there some things, now that we're thinking about the big picture, but what are some things that I think are going to be important for clinicians to think about from that point of view?
Well, of course, the overwhelming theme that we are facing is disparity, the access to healthcare. And, I think we did very well with the telemedicine. But here is the big but. In many places, 10 to 20 to 40 or 50% of the population does not have access to adequate broadband. So all the high risk groups that we ideally would like to reach, those who have this access easily, it's no problem. But are we going to identify in our practice also the high risk patients who have no access to broadband, and what could we do for them? What are their responsibilities? Another issue is, let's say, the care for patients with advanced liver disease. Now, one of the major developments, I would say, in hepatology, as one side that we save more lives, for example, by transplant options, but we have been in a total denial that many patients with advanced liver disease will die. And how we best provide care for these patients, we are finally working with palliative care specialists in trying to improve that. Now, the COVID has made this all even more relevant and more complex because, you know, as a hepatologist, you may focus on liver disease, but now we need to have an honest balance, not only in the COVID patients, but also the patients with liver disease, with COVID, without COVID. And again, how do we balance that, that we are not too small-minded, only focusing on our group of patients?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the other thing that you had mentioned in the article, which I found really interesting, is sort of a positive note, which is how we can leverage some of the things that have happened to us over the past year and a half into things that will benefit our patients. So, you know, I think that things have been stretched very thin, but, you know, what are some lessons learned? What are some things that you think that moving forward, we have learned that can improve patient care moving forward?
Well, very simple. The first thing is we touched already a little bit on the access to our systems. Suddenly, where so many hurdles were created by telemedicine, by insurance carriers and others, suddenly we realize that much more is possible, that we can bring the care to the patients and that patients don't need to travel 5 hours to get an answer on a simple question and go home, had to take off a day, etc. One simple thing. But a totally different thing is the much more team approach to healthcare. Yes, it's fine to have a hepatologist, but if you have not a navigator that helps you to get through the system, to access, we can order testing, but the infrastructure, how to make that happen. And then we identify problems as the most basic access to food and to other basic aspects. We need in society to cooperate with many more parties to get how will you treat a malnourished patient with advanced liver disease simply saying eating better, and they have no tool and no access to the basic needs that they have. So I think there are multiple of that type of issues that we really can do better, and I think as A.A.S.L.D. we may have to have our own task force. What can we contribute to upgrading our approach to medicine? And there's a lot that we have learned and will continue to learn from the system.
I agree, and I think that this has certainly been an eye-opening experience, and you know, all we can do is move forward. And I think I want to thank you for pointing out some of the issues that we're facing, especially with regards to ethics, and also thinking through some solutions in the future. So, Dr. Van Leeuwen, thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to hearing and reading more from you in the future.
Thank you. My pleasure.